When I started my podcast and I started my coaching business, my intuition just got louder and louder because I stepped into something that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was 17 years old becoming a life coach. That makes no sense to people. It made no sense to me at the time, and it's something that I'm so grateful that I did because it's led me down this path of just so much more joy than I think I would have ever experienced in my life.
This week, I'm honored to be joined by James Brackin, who at just 20 years old has already become an accomplished life coach and host of the Top 1% show, the You Can Too podcast.
I believed that life was happening to me. I lost my father, uncle, both at 37. My grandfather passed away a few months before his retirement. Like, I always thought that life was happening to me. Went through depression, anxiety, all the things that, that victim mindset, it's just going to bring up another reason that life is happening to me. There was a moment in my life when instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I asked, how is this happening for me? If you think of the way that life is supposed to be, you get to 30, you're supposed to have 2 kids, you're supposed to have a job that's making 6 figures, you're supposed to. I don't like the supposed to. Like, I never want to live a life that what other people are doing. I'm really allowing myself to not be too attached to a certain path because I think the best skill that you can develop in life is the ability to pivot. Because if I'm so dead set on one specific path, then I'm turning myself off to all of the opportunities that life's going to present me with. The biggest regret that people end their life with is that I wish I lived a life true to myself and not one that others expected of me. I want to live that now rather than getting to the end of my life with that regret. That means doing something that, or maybe not doing something that other people think I should do, and really seeping in the realization that that's not what I want.
If everything came tumbling down tomorrow, like society's gone, everything that we've been working towards, it just kind of fades away. Do you think you would honestly be able to say that you went all in on everything that you love?
I think that's a difficult question.
Yeah.
Because I think the way that I want to live my life isn't that way. I'll make that make sense because
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this more recently. I think a lot of people live a life based off shoulds. So the sense of I'm going down this path, I should want to do I should want to take on more. I should
Yeah.
want to do all of these things. And I think should is shame, man. Like if I don't feel in alignment with something, that should needs to get thrown out of the window
Yeah.
because I'm going to do what feels in alignment with me. So when I say that, I mean like my belief is that the purpose of life is to enjoy the passage of time because I've just seen so many people in my life pass away so young that it's like, yeah, I'd like to shoot for everything that I'm looking for. And that might mean going all in or whatever you define as all in.
Yeah.
But I also want to enjoy every day as well. And so that might mean stopping work at 6 o'clock instead of working until 12 p.m. or whatever people expect. But
Yeah.
um, I'd say that I'm living in alignment with my values and the life that I want to live, not what others expect of me.
Yeah. And to me, that sounds like going all in, absolutely, where you're
Yeah,
not allowing one avenue of your life to dictate what you do every single aspect of the day. And you're
yeah,
going all in on your relationships, on your work, on anything that sparks your curiosity. To me, that sounds like a life well lived. And it is something that a lot of people around our age struggle with because
mhm,
there are those outer voices that are constantly bombarding us, telling us, okay, here's what you should be doing.
yep,
And then we start to think like that's our own idea. And then, what's offender number one with people around our age is like going to college, right? So
yeah,
people say, all right, here you go. You should go to college. And this is what you should be doing with your career. And here's what you should be doing with your family and the next steps. And we start to adopt these ideas that come at us as our own ideas, but meanwhile, they're not even our own ideas. Is there anything as of recently that sounds like that was something for you where maybe it was an idea that someone or something placed into your mind and you thought it was your idea, but as you reflected upon it and then you actually took the time to analyze where that idea came from, you realized, oh, this isn't really what I want.
yeah. Actually, I had a speaking opportunity come up recently,
Oh,
and I turned it down. And I turned it down because I've been really in touch with my intuition. I think
yeah,
as when I started my podcast and I started my coaching business, um, my intuition just got louder and louder because I stepped into something that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. It's like you said, it's like, you think of college, you think of all these things. I was 17 years old becoming a life coach. That makes no sense to people, right? Made no sense to me at the time. And it's something that I'm so grateful that I did because it's led me down this path of just so much more joy than I think I would have ever experienced in my life.
yeah,
And I turned down that speaking opportunity, not to say that I won't do it in the future, not to say speaking isn't something that I want to step into in the future, but I felt like I should have done that thing because I had other people telling me that I should do that thing.
yeah,
And when I thought about it, I really asked myself, like, is this something that I want to do, or am I actually going to do this thing because I'm being told I should? And
Hmm.
it's like, like you said earlier, it's like living to the fullest, and it's like that might mean doing that thing, but if I don't feel in alignment with it, well, then why am I doing it? You know, the
Yeah.
biggest regret that people end their life with is that I lived in alignment, or I wish I lived a life true to myself and not one that others expected of me.
Yeah.
And I take that in, and I want to live that now rather than getting to the end of my life with that regret. And so that means doing something that, or maybe not doing something that people think I should do,
Yeah.
and really just seeping in the realization that that's not what I want.
Yeah.
Maybe it is what I want in the future, but right now, that's not what I want. And I'm gonna be in alignment and trust my intuition that I'm making the right choice. And maybe it's the wrong choice, but I think whatever you choose is, you got to live your fate. And so yeah, that's something that has actually recently came up for me.
Yeah. Do you think there's a distinction between your intuition when it comes with thinking with your heart versus thinking with your mind? I've heard that sometimes from people where they have this idea of they have this passion in their heart and they think that's their intuition, and then it counteracts what their mind is telling them, whether it's their subconscious or their conscious telling them that this is the action that they should be taking. Is that a dichotomy you ever feel in yourself?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I had a meditation teacher and best-selling author of my podcast a few weeks ago. His name's Watkins. And he was talking about this because it's really about his new book that he came out with. And a lot of people live their life with their intuition as a still small voice. So it's like it's in your head, but you don't really hear it, and you listen to your mind. You listen to the self-doubt. Like
Yeah.
me, if I listen to my mind stepping into coaching, I would have never done it.
Yeah.
Like if you really think about that, I wouldn't be speaking with you right now if I listened to my mind, because it's always limiting. Your perception of yourself is always going to be limiting. And so if you listen to that, well, then you're always going to say in a stagnant life that you don't deserve. But you listen to your intuition and you want it to be like a loud, annoying voice. You want it to be like yelling at you, and you want it to be like straight in your face so that you can actually trust it and listen to it and lean into it.
Yeah.
And that's your heart. That's your gut. That's your gut instinct. Like our mind and our gut are so interconnected, but we don't understand. Like we do not understand how much our gut plays in our life and how we feel about things. And we don't really trust our feelings, but we trust our thoughts. When our thoughts are ideas and our feelings are actually something that, we feel that we should do this thing, or we feel that it doesn't feel in alignment. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best things that you can do is really get in touch with your intuition.
Yeah. Do you have a gut feeling about the path that you're currently on? I know. So, for audience reference, you just turned 20. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy to be able to say that you're at this point right now, and you've accomplished so much in terms of helping people, bringing together people in a community that they never would have expected to. And you're the leader in a sense. You're the leader at such a young age. And I can reflect upon myself at 20 and just think I wasn't capable of doing what you're doing. And I keep giving you flowers for that. And I'm going to keep giving you them because you deserve them. But do you have just this gut feeling about this next decade that's coming up? Where
For,
I like this phrase of trying to play in decades now. I heard it on the internet and I keep repeating it to myself. Do you
yeah.
have a gut feeling over this next decade that there's a step that you're willing to take? And, some might view it as risky, some might view it as crazy, but it's a step that you're going to take and it's the game that you want to play for this next decade.
First off, I appreciate you, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better at receiving that kind of stuff, because I think as people probably that are listening to this podcast, we don't always receive compliments. We're thinking about the next thing we want to do. We want to think about the next thing that we want to accomplish rather than
Yeah.
receiving that. So trying to get better at receiving that, because sometimes it's hard to see that kind of stuff, and I really appreciate that.
Anytime.
Um, because man, like you say that you wouldn't been able to have done it, but you didn't experience it, so you don't know if you would have been able to do it. And I bet you would have,
Yeah.
because I've met you. You're amazing.
Thank you,
Um,
man.
and I appreciate you having me on the show as well. So
Yeah, of course.
I think for me, I look in decades as well. I mean, when I started this podcast, if I think back 2 years ago, I was in my car, dude. Like I literally had I didn't even have a microphone. Like I was speaking with no one. I was speaking to myself. And
Yeah.
so to think about that quantum leap that I've made, even just speaking with people that I'm speaking with now, um, I like to think in decades, but I also like to think like, am I enjoying what I'm doing right now? And I'm
Hmm.
enjoying what I'm doing right now. And
Yeah.
so I really have been questioning goals recently, if I'm honest with you. I think I haven't really set too many goals in the sense of, I see goals as guidelines. Like I've always looked in the mindset of, I want to focus on my direction, not my results.
Yeah.
So am I moving in the direction that I want to be moving in? Every single week I'm definitely speaking with people every single week on the podcast. I'm meeting with clients. Like I am moving in the direction that I want to be moving in. And so I'm just going to leave everything else up to how it's supposed to happen, because I'm doing exactly what I feel like I should be doing every single day to be
Yeah.
moving in the direction that I want to be moving in. And so I think like you said, is a big decision or a big thing. I think it was doing this to begin with, like going down this path, letting go of the opinions and the expectations of every other person that I left high school with, stepping into this space. Like, it was the most terrifying decision I ever did, was just doing it to begin with.
Yeah.
Now I'm on this path, and now I'm just wanting to do my best to enjoy this entire path as I'm moving towards where I'd like to go. Of course, I'd like to have a massive podcast. I'd love to monetize the podcast in the future and make it something that is like the core of my business. Um, but if that doesn't happen, I'm really working on detaching from
Yeah.
that not happening, because I'm enjoying it, and that's what matters.
I just want to dive a little bit deeper into that because the way it sounds to me, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, just cut me off.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're not afraid of the next step, but it also sounds like you're not completely comfortable with where you are now. Like you're not just content, like, oh, if this is all it is, like I'm completely fine, like this will be
Mhm.
it. Like you're always striving for more. And again, it's something I admire about you is that you're so young and yet you're so forward thinking.
Mm.
But when it comes to planning for these goals, it doesn't sound like you're scared to plan out the next goal because you're afraid of not being able to achieve it. So I'm trying to get at the root of why do you think you're struggling with coming up with the next goal? Is it because there's an overwhelming amount of options out there that trying to narrow down what the actual goal could be is a daunting task? Or do you think maybe it's something else?
I think it's not that, and I don't think I'm struggling with setting goals. I think
Mhm.
I'm choosing not to.
Okay.
Because the way that I think of it is like, if you think of the way that life is supposed to be, you get to 30, you're supposed to have two kids, you're supposed to have a job that's making six figures, you're supposed to.
Yeah.
I don't like the supposed to. Like, I never want to live a life that's
Yeah.
what other people are doing. I'm not doing that to begin with. Like you said, it's like I'm not down the path that most people go down.
Yeah.
And so if I were to set a goal, let's say for example, like 10-year goals make no sense to me. For
Yeah.
some people, like if you have a business and like that's your, like you're doing a startup and you want your business to achieve this said revenue, or you want to achieve this amount of employees, I get that. But for most people, y- your mind's going to change. You're going to change your mind 2 months down the road, 3 years down the road. Like, what you say you want in 10 years from now is going to be so different from your reference of time now compared to 3 years down the road. And so I think that setting goals to that extent almost takes me away from like, what do I really feel in alignment with right now? Like, maybe I want to have a coaching business right now, but maybe in 2 years from now, I don't want to do one-on-one coaching anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to go into group coaching. Maybe I want to go all in on the podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to go into a startup and just learn and have fun. You know what I mean? So I'm really allowing myself to not be too attached to a certain path, because I think the best skill that you can develop in life is the ability to pivot. And
Yeah.
so I'm just embracing the pivots that life's kind of bringing me. Like, and I'm just, because if I'm so dead set on one specific path, then I'm turning myself off to all of the opportunities that life's going to present me with.
Yeah.
And I think that's not a well lived life.
Yeah. It's funny. I see that book behind you, The Pathless Path. And yeah, you don't want to get caught on one path, especially the one that society tells you is the path. I think it's a really good
I
point
do too.
to go further on is
Mm,
not getting attached to something.
yeah.
And it's interesting because I think of that too when it comes to investing in ourselves. And it ties
Mm,
back to your story, right? You're 17, you're working at Dick's Sporting Goods, and you spend thousands of dollars on a coaching. And that's an investment that a lot of people, first of all, at that age would never even consider because they're like,
ugh,
I got to start saving up money if I'm going to pay for college, if I'm going to pay for a new car and stuff like that. And I still think it's something that a lot of people, even when they're a bit older, thousands of dollars is a lot of money. A lot of
yeah.
people wouldn't even consider making that investment. And I think it ties really well into that attachment aspect because I think a lot of people neglect to invest in themselves because they think, oh, if I do this right now, am I really going to want the fruits of the labor in a couple years from now? So if I invest in this coaching business right now, am I really going to still want to be a coach in a couple years, or am I just putting out thousands of dollars for no reason? How do you go about evaluating, okay, even if I don't stick with this for years to come, the skills that I'm going to get from this investment right now are going to play out with whatever path I end up going down?
Yeah, I'll state it with a question that I ask myself to help me make decisions is, what's the cost of inaction?
Hmm.
I ask that for clients all the time. Like when you're fearful of making a scary step, or you're fearful of making a change, um, what's the cost of inaction? Is it staying the same? Is it the constant unsettling life that you're going, like the path that you're going down? Well, then likely that's I'm going to do it, right? Like we always think of the cost of taking action, the failure, the embarrassment, the resentment, the shame, the guilt, but we never think of the cost of inaction. Like what happens if you don't take action? You're going to get to the end of your life and there's going to be a lot more things that you wish you did do than things that you didn't.
Yeah.
And so if that's the truth, if that's the reality of it, then how are you going to feel at the end of your life? Are you going to regret not doing this thing? Well, then you need to make the decision and do it. Because I think we think, and I think this is a big reason that people, whether it's investing in themselves or just doing something different, is that they feel like they're going to waste time.
Yeah.
And they feel like, okay, if I go down, say for coaching, for example, I've seen this so much. I joined that coaching program. I was the youngest person in that coaching program of all coaches. And when I got success in the beginning of the coaching program, everyone looked at me like I had some secret code, or I had some like there was something different about me. And it's like there's nothing different about me. I'm just doing what they're telling me to do, and you're not doing what they're telling you what to do. And so it's like it's simple, but it's not easy. It doesn't make it easy. But going down that path is like they'll think that they're wasting, say, just investing in yourself. Like if you invest into me, or you invest into a coach in general, I know we spoke about you stepping into coaching or of some sort. It's like
Yeah.
we think that it's a waste of time doing something because we think, oh, it's not going to work out anyway. Like it's not going to turn out the way that I want it to. So our belief is that it's not going to work out. We're not going to behave in ways to make it work out. Our belief drives our behavior.
Yeah.
But if you believe, if you have like a concrete belief that this is going to work out, you're going to take action like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And then it's going to work out better than you could possibly imagine. But we hold on to this belief so much that it's not going to work out, to the point that we don't even go down the path.
Yeah.
And we think that the wasting the time is like going down that path, but the wasting the time is not doing anything. It's not making any decision, because
Yeah.
that in itself is a decision to stay in what you're doing. And if you're not lit up by what you're doing, well, then you need to make a different decision, even if that's quote unquote wasting time or making a failure. It's like someone that wants to leave their job. I love to use this analogy. Let's say you leave your job, you're terrified to leave your job and to step into entrepreneurship or
Mhm.
a business or whatever that looks like for you, because you think, oh, if I fail, like failure is final. Like it's the end of everything.
Yeah.
But let's really play that out. If you were to leave your job, you leave your job, you go into entrepreneurship, you try to start a business, you lose all your money and you fail. You go back to your job, and the only thing that you really lost is maybe a couple $1,000s and your pride,
Yeah.
your ego, and how you think other people are going to think of you. You're going to feel embarrassed. But what did you learn? Well, maybe that's not the thing that I wanted to do. Maybe you learned a few things about yourself. Maybe you found a few skills that you didn't know you had. Like you're going to learn a lot more from doing something, even if you quote unquote fail at it, because failure is the feedback. But if you do absolutely nothing, you learn nothing, and then you
Yeah.
stay in a constant life that you're probably unsettled with. That was a long answer, but I think that's so important for people to understand.
No, I love long answers. And I think what we tend to focus on is that when we lose something, when we lose someone, we don't see what else can be gained.
Hmm.
So when that toxic person leaves our life, we might be so hung up that they're not with us anymore. But what have we gained by not having them around anymore? When we lose that version of ourselves that we used to cling on to and we used to say,
Yeah.
this is me, what do we gain? And
Hmm.
you referenced it when you were going through that answer. When we met a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and right at the beginning of our conversation, it's why I wanted to start our conversation off with a somewhat hard question, is you just punched me right in the mouth. You were like, why aren't you in coaching?
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a good answer for you because it was something I never think about myself. And
Yeah.
I tried to come up with an answer. I was just like, I just don't think I'm qualified to do that. And you were like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And just right away, you were open and honest. And that's something I still have to let go of, is this
Hmm.
version of myself that I view as not being qualified enough to help other people. And when I lose that version of myself, what am I going to gain? Probably a better relationship with myself because I'll better understand myself. And I'll gain better relationships with the people in my own life, people that I
Yep.
can bring into my life. You never know what's going to happen, but it has to be, you have to let go. And in this case, for me, if I want to get into the coaching business, I have to let go of this notion that I have of myself. Now,
Hmm.
you helped me that day identify this self limiting belief.
Yeah.
But, not everyone has you, not everyone has that person in their ear that's going to be able to help them come to that conclusion. So for
Hmm.
somebody who's listening and they might not even recognize that they have a self-limiting belief right now, what's a simple framework they can do to say, okay, how can I analyze What's limiting me right now? And what's one of the first steps that I can do to chip away at that barrier that I've built for myself?
Mhm. Such a good question, man. I want to restate something really quick because I think it's so powerful. I did challenge you, and I like to challenge people. I like to challenge
Yeah.
their beliefs, the way that they live their life, because I have this core belief. It's just in my body that if you are not bringing your unique gifts into the world, you are doing a disservice.
Yeah.
Like every single one of us is different in some way, and we have a gift we can bring to the world, whether we believe we do or we don't. Like this podcast for you, you have a gift in being able to do this. I've told you
Thank
this
you.
before, right? But if you never brought this into the world, well, then people that listen to this show wouldn't be able to get something from it. And so
Yeah.
you're doing it literally a disservice to other people because you have self doubt.
Hmm.
And when my coach first brought that to my awareness was like, oh, I'm not gonna go reach out to get clients because I don't believe I can help them, or I don't believe I'm good enough or worthy enough.
Yeah.
The people are literally suffering because you have self-doubt. It's like, well, I'm not going to let my self-doubt stop me from helping people. You know what I mean? And so it puts it in a much different perspective when you think of it that way. When
Yeah.
it comes to bringing up a belief, I think that the first part of it is being aware that that belief is even there, right? Like you said, like I think really taking in knowledge, like books and podcasts that make you ask better questions
Yeah.
is something that's really big. Now, I'll give an example for me was that I believed that life was happening to me. I lost
Hmm.
my father, uncle, both at 37. My grandfather passed away a few months before his retirement. Like I always thought that life was happening to me. Went through depression, anxiety, all the things that, that victim mindset is just it's just going to bring up another reason that life is happening to me. I There was a moment in my life when instead of asking why is this happening to me, I asked how is this happening for me? If you think of your mind like chat gbt, you're going to give it a different prompt and you're going to get a different answer.
Yeah.
Most people are going through life either not giving their mind a prompt to begin with, so they're just running through their programming that they were given through their parents or the society that they grew up in, or they're giving themselves a bad prompt like why is this happening to me. You're going to get a bad answer. And so the thing that I would say is nothing specific, because you have to be first aware that of what belief is showing up, but you just have to ask different questions. When you ask different questions, you will get different answers. And it sounds so simple because it is, but it doesn't make it easy. And the second part I would say on that is don't go surface level. So many people are going surface level. They'll ask why, but they'll ask why once, and then they'll get a surface level answer.
Yeah.
The reason why I find coaching so valuable, and it's like when we were speaking, it's like I'm gonna dive deeper, ask why 5 times to get to the real core of like why you're not doing what you feel you could do, or anything in that realm of how you're limiting yourself. You have to
Yeah.
go deeper. Like what's the real reason? Like I'll say, for example, procrastination is something that people struggle with, but they think that that's the problem when that's the symptom to a problem.
Yeah.
Like you're not procrastinating just because you're lazy, you're procrastinating because there's a fear there,
Yeah.
but you're not going to know that unless you go deeper. So I would just say go deeper.
When you're faced with death at an early age like that, that's not something, and when I say something, I mean mortality, that a lot of people want to recognize or they want to accept. And yet you were able to, like we've been talking about this whole time, you were able to look at something that's tragic that nobody ever wants to go through. And you were able to look at that situation and you would say to yourself, okay, I'm not going allow this to cripple me. I'm going to allow this to be the best version of myself that I possibly can be. And to me, I refer to that as embracing your own mortality. So when we think about asking ourselves why 5 times over, you could say, okay, why did this happen to me? And that would be the surface level why that a lot of people get stuck at. And I think you explained that really well. That I think you need to go deeper and deeper, especially with something like mortality, because I think when we embrace our own mortality, that's when we can start breaking down those limitations that we place on ourselves. Because we
Mhm.
can say, I got one shot at this. If I let it pass by because I'm not embracing this life that I've been giving, then what am I doing? And I know a lot of people around our age haven't had those experiences that you've had. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry that you've had to go through them. I can only imagine how difficult it was growing up, having to navigate those experiences. And to see the man that you've become, I mean, you're only 20, but again, I'll give you more flowers. To see the man that you've become, it's incredible. For somebody who hasn't had to embrace their own mortality yet, how would you describe to them why it's so important?
First off, I appreciate you, and I want to reinforce that I'm so damn grateful it happened.
Mm,
Um, I was on a podcast right before this, like I said, and he brought up something where um, I don't even remember how he brought it up, but it was like bringing up death in that regard. And I think I'm so grateful it happened, rather than um, like I would not take it back. Like if I could have a father, if I could have all the men in my life like be around, I wouldn't have wanted it,
yeah,
because I wouldn't have an old soul. I wouldn't have like everything the way that my perspective on life wouldn't be the same. So I would say that first.
yeah,
Secondly, I think for people that haven't gone through that, I think the important part to recognize is, or a good exercise that you can do is like, um, think of yourself on your deathbed. Like I always go back to that core of like, how are you going to feel at the end of your life if you didn't do this thing? Not
yeah,
if you did do it, but like if you didn't do this thing, because that's usually where we get in our own way. It's not that we don't do enough. We don't do enough things really. Like we need to do more instead of like holding ourselves back. So I would say at the end of your life, would you regret not doing this thing? And if that answer is yes, then you need to lean into that thing. I think it's really hard to internalize our mortality, even if you've experienced it. Like I've seen, like I've said, many people pass away in my life young, and
yeah,
it doesn't take away the fact that like I still experience some days where I think my problems are the biggest things in the world, and I recognize. I go on a walk and I look at the sky and I'm like, man, this world is so damn expansive. Like my problem, everyone else has a problem too. Like it's not just me, right? We get so caught up in ourselves sometimes that I would just say, really think about how you're going to feel at the end of your life and make your decisions from that,
yeah,
because you don't need you don't need someone to pass away in your life for you to make a change. Like they always, I don't remember who said this, but change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes more painful than making a change, right? And
yeah,
so most people get to the point where you get to such a bad point where it forces you to make a change. But what I want to really ingrain in people's mind is that you don't have to wait till something gets bad for you to make a positive change. You don't have to wait until that moment. You can decide to make that change now by looking through the reference of how would my future self, my 85-year-old self, what would they tell me? Because we
yeah,
have the answers, but as probably most of your audience does, is we're looking outside of ourselves for the answers.
yeah,
When I believe that the answers are in the questions that we have to ask ourselves, because we all have the answers.
yeah. We do, and it does take that period of self discovery where you have to just sit with yourself in silence. And a lot of people can't handle boredom nowadays. They can't handle silence, but that's when you hear yourself the loudest. It really is, and you can. It, everything becomes clear once you embrace just that. Silence is so powerful, and
It is.
yeah, man, it's powerful to hear you talk about all of this because I think about the relationship that I have with my own father, and I think about the male figures that I have in my life, and I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I was like, I wouldn't be anything without my father or my parents, especially. And they were like, I don't think that's true. I think you're a very like independent person, and I had to really reflect on that because my father especially has been such an influential figure in my life. But one of the biggest gifts he's given to me is that I am an independent person now because he taught me how to go through that. And you know, I, you lost your father at a very young age, right? And your grandfather at a very young age. Is there anything that you really remember about them that sticks out to you as a virtue or as an ideal that you try to carry with you every day?
So this is going to be a funny one because it's not what you're looking for, but this is what I can think, man. I'll say so. My father passed when I was 6, so I couldn't even tell you how he spoke. Like I don't remember anything of my father,
Yeah,
um, whatsoever. When I see a picture of him, I'm even like curious of like
yeah, like that's him.
that's what he looks like. Wow, I didn't know
Yeah,
that. So I can't say I have really any memories of my father. My uncle passed away. Probably when I was 12 or so. He passed away at 37 too. It's weird how the world works. They both
I
passed at
know. Like,
37.
what are the odds? Yeah,
Well, yeah, it's so weird. But uh, for him, I can't really recollect much either. Realistically, my
yeah.
grandfather. This is the one that I'll think of is um, to always finish your food. Um, and that sounds like such a subtle thing, but dude, like I really, and this is why I say like I really don't wish I had that because I didn't. Like my grandfather lived in Virginia. I live in upstate New York. Like I didn't get to see him much either. I got to see him probably once a year. And
Yeah.
so lost my father. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 2. I never got to see him, and my uncle was never home. So I didn't get to see any of the people that passed away in my life. So I wasn't able to really have an attachment to them of any sort. Not
Yeah.
much lessons learned. I think for my grandfather, I would say that like hard work is a really important thing. Like he worked his ass off every single day, but the way that he worked his life away, uh, I'll say that, yeah. My grandfather passed away a few months before his retirement.
Yeah.
He worked his entire life like he was working as like a child. Like his parents were not good to him. He worked as a child, and he worked his entire life. I remember going to my grandmother's house, um, well, their house when I was younger. Me and my sister would go drive down to Virginia, and like he would work the entire week and then come home on the weekend to like spend time with his wife.
Hmm.
And literally my grandmother and him, like we all had like a trip that we were going to go to Disney World when he retired. All of us, like we never went on trips, we never did anything like that, so this was going to be like our big family trip a few months before he passes away, before we get to go on the trip. And
Ah,
so that for me just puts into my soul that yeah, work is important, but I do not want to work my life away, first off doing something that I don't enjoy, and then secondly to get to my retirement and not even be able to experience it.
yeah.
So I would say that.
Yeah. That reminds me so much. I know you and I both know Kyle McDowell, and we were
Mhm.
having similar conversation about his mother and how she went through a very similar experience. And
Yeah,
I relate to it so much too. And and of course, with all the research I do, I was reading about your
I was
grandpa
gonna
and your
say,
dad.
yeah, yeah.
He was an Air Force veteran. Your grandpa?
Mhm.
Yeah. My both my grandparents. One was in the Navy. One was in the Marines. And they never really talked about it that much. But those ideals they carry down, and you can feel it in different aspects of your life. And then I know you just said you didn't know too much about your dad, but I was curious if you've ever asked. They called your dad boss.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Do
Wow,
you know
dude.
why they did
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. He was a boss from what I've heard of everyone in my family, like just the energy that he carried, I guess. But he was a boss at work too.
Yeah.
So like my grandfather, uncle, and my father all worked on bridges. That was their work. And so uh essentially I guess what his job was they'd they'd paint a bunch of bridges, but he would just literally sit there and tell him what to do. So he was the boss. Like he had a whole mug, he had everything.
Yeah.
But he passed when I was 6, to the point where I didn't get to know much about him, I think.
Yeah.
So to even really sit in that
I know.
realistically, but I
Yeah.
would say that. And
You and
honestly,
I. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think that's a good thing because I'm grateful I didn't get to have an attachment to him or anyone that was in my family, because I feel like the loss would have hurt more, because I really can't say I had that much. I also think too, where like we have to look at the what do we gain instead of what did we lose. That, like you said earlier, I love that. That's so important,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of young men, especially, they attach themselves to what their father did in
Yeah.
some respect, like whether it's the career path that they go down or they take on some of the bad characteristics that that person had. And for me, I didn't have any male figure to emulate off of by any means, like no male figure. And
Yeah.
so I really got to carve who I wanted to be, the path that I wanted to go down. And so the more I age, the more gratitude I have for things like that, realistically. And I think
Yeah.
people, that's a much different perspective than most would take.
Yeah. No, I totally feel you. And I do the same thing with my father. Is I felt attached, like I had to go down a similar path to him. And one weird connection that you and I have um, is I'm Tom Cole, but I'm Tom Cole Jr.
Hmm.
And I know you're James the Fourth.
Yeah.
And it's not something that a lot of people focus on nowadays because it's not like we're like King Henry the Eighth or anything like that.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
do you ever think about like carrying on the family name? And like, does that have any weight to you? To me personally, I don't know if it does, but I'm just curious to hear if you've ever thought about that yourself.
Nah, I think for me, I don't even think about kids. I mean, I'm 20, so I don't even think about that
Yeah,
kind of
I was
stuff.
gonna say it's a
Like,
bit young.
yeah, well, I mean, even in general, I think like, um, it's funny. My mom said that my dad wanted to name me Preston,
Huh.
and I said I would have much rather liked Preston. James is in the last 100 years, James is the most common boy name, which is crazy to
Yeah.
think about. Because I looked that up. I was like, dude, I don't know many Jameses, but I know that there's so many. And I think of it like there's got to be something wrong with the James William Bracken, the first, second, third, and fourth, because they all passed real young. I don't want to carry it on if they're gonna pass so young. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a good thing. Crazy as that sounds.
It's a funny
You
thought,
know,
man.
I find it funny because yeah, like everyone says that they're like, oh, you're the fourth, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm the only one here, so like I don't even think of it like the fourth or third or second or anything
Yeah.
like that, because you know what I mean. That's
Yeah, you
just my
get
perspective.
I think this is just a good mindset to have in general. Like, yeah, I have the
Yeah,
same name, but like I'm me.
yeah,
Like
literally.
I
They're
yeah,
yeah.
I always used to be a joke because at the high school I went to, my dad was an administrator for the school.
Hmm.
So everybody knew who he was, and everyone would be like, "Oh, you're exactly like your father, like you're a spitting image of your father and stuff like that." I'm like, "Yeah." And at the time, I really liked it just because like people would always talk to
Yeah,
me about like my dad and stuff. But you know, I want to be me too. Like I don't want to be the next version of my dad. And yeah, there's
yes,
a lot of great qualities that I would love to take from my dad, and hopefully, when I become a dad one day, like I can pass those down. But like, I want to be the best version of me, and
absolutely.
I think podcasting has really helped me do that. Where I think I've gained a confidence in myself,
Hmm.
and I think I've gained, like we talked about before, how having conversations like this help me identify certain beliefs that I have in myself or certain ideas that I've never even thought about talking about.
Hmm.
Just talking to other people, it's been very profound. And I know when you started podcasting, you started off like you said, like in the car and stuff like that. Little podcast trivia for you about your own podcast.
Yeah,
Do you know what episode number? And this is for anybody who's thinking about starting their own stuff. And James is a top 1% podcast. He's interviewed amazing people.
yeah.
Do you know what episode number was your first interview?
I think it was 101, 101 or 100. Tell me I'm wrong. That's crazy.
I think it was 106. That's what I
106.
had
Yeah.
written down. But just to think about it, 105 times you went through doing something by yourself, and then the 106th
Oh yeah.
iteration of it, it was finally time to take that next leap. And just listening to the conversations you've had, the growth you've had over that year in terms of the questions that you ask people, the ability that you have to build camaraderie with them, it's
Yeah.
exponential.
Appreciate
Is
that.
there anything that you identify in yourself in terms of how podcasting has allowed you to grow in your own personal relationships? So I'm sure you have personal relationships with some of the people that you bring on the show,
Hmm.
but even with your mother, even with some of your friends, some of strangers you meet out on the street,
Hmm.
how has just talking repeatedly and repeatedly asking thoughtful questions impacted relationships as a whole?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. I I just got to give you props, brother. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
How much effort you put into this kind of stuff, asking questions, bringing up my father, and all that kind of stuff. I just have to I have to see you for that, brother. I just love it.
Thank you.
Um, dude, yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it goes back to asking, just being curious. I had Gay Hendricks on my podcast a few months ago, and if for those that don't know who he is, a therapist. He's written 40 plus books. He's been in this space for 40 plus years. Like he's in his late 70s. And I hopped on a podcast with him and I'd never seen someone lit up so much.
Hmm.
Like I genuinely never seen someone so excited and so like just enthusiastic about talking about this kind of stuff that we talk about.
Yeah.
And I think that that was such a transformational podcast for me because it was like I want to do something that lights me up like that, like for the rest of my life. And podcasting is definitely that for me. I felt called to do this. I tell people, and I think for me, it's just staying in a constant state of questioning. He says that the number one thing that we have as humans is our ability to wonder, and many of us don't do that. Right? A lot of us think too small. We don't shoot too big for our goals. We kind of stay in this specific path that we think we're supposed to go down. That's why I said I don't really want to set too many goals because it takes me away from like the moving of life of like what path is this going to bring me down, what is this going to do for me, and just staying in a constant state of questioning. So I think for when it comes to relationships or just in general, um I think for both coaching and podcasting, I'm asking just really tough questions. That's what my job is.
Yeah.
And so when I'm speaking with other people, relationships, maybe to a fault, I call them out on their bullshit a lot.
Yeah. Called
And
me out on
whether it's
mine. Yep.
yeah, yeah, right. It's just it's a habit, man. It's just because I see so much in people that like it's hard for me not to challenge them in a way that like I see in them.
Right.
I once heard that a quote that sometimes you need someone to believe in you more than you believe in yourself, and I want to be that person for everyone. And so I really I try to do that to my best extent, and I do that in every conversation. And sometimes um that's to a fault because people's ego, their unconscious wants to stay where they're at, and
Yeah.
so they don't have the awareness to recognize that I'm trying to pull them out of it, if that makes sense.
No, no,
So
totally. Yeah.
sometimes to a fault, but that's what I would say has been a big thing for sure. And just
You ever
my
get, yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
You ever get the flip side of that? Like, does your mom hold you to a higher standard? Or does she call
Uh,
you out more because she knows that you have this skill set?
no, absolutely not. I don't think anyone can hold me to the standard I hold to myself.
Yeah.
Really, even coaches that I work with, like no one's gonna hold me to the standard that I hold myself to, and that's I want it that way. I want me
Yeah,
to
that's awesome.
be that for myself. No, not at all. Definitely not my family or anything like that. No.
Nice. No, that's awesome to hear. You ever think about the alternate reality where, I don't know, maybe you never tear your labrum, or like you never have all those injuries, and like baseball works out, and then you end up going to college? Like, you ever think about like what that life would have looked like? Because like none of this, I doubt we would be here right now. You'd probably be in what, you're like junior or senior year of college right now, and like
Hmm.
probably partying or something. Like, it's a Friday today. Like, do you ever think about like what would you even have like studied? Did that thought ever cross your mind as to like where you even wanted to go to school and stuff like that?
No, not really. I think I love what I do so much, man. I wake up and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like I
Yeah.
genuinely wake up every day and think this doesn't make sense, man. Like I could I could I could have not I never in my life could have predicted what I'm doing right now. I mean, at my core, when I was growing up, um, I told my mom, my sister, I wanted to be a motivational speaker. Like at such a young age that I don't even remember saying that, but I know I did because they
Yeah.
bring it up to me when I do this kind of stuff. And um, I think back and I'm like, I literally knew I wanted to do this all along, like
Hmm.
go down this path. But in high school and in school, I was so terrified of other people's opinions, and like I couldn't. I had such a negative view of myself that I had to work on myself to like. I'm so glad COVID happened and everything happened because I would never had time for solace and like really to ask myself the right questions.
Yeah.
Um, but no, dude, I'm so damn grateful everything happened. I'm so blessed that I tore my labrum. I mean, I wish I never had to get surgery because it's the
Yeah.
worst. And but I would not be full of. I don't think baseball or any path that I could have gone down would bring me the joy and fulfillment that I get from just having conversations with you. Like you bringing up this kind of stuff, man. It's never a podcaster that can do that, and that's why like I when we first met, I was like, dude, like I see, you know what I mean? I see stuff in you
Yeah.
that you can't even see in yourself because it's
I
like,
really appreciate
yeah,
that.
it's powerful stuff.
Well, we have that connection too. I was a huge baseball player when I was in high school.
Yeah, you look like it.
So thank you.
Yeah.
um, my sister played D1 softball, and
Mm,
she had an interesting experience. Or she went to Fordham first, didn't really work out, so she transferred, went to Manhattan College, didn't really end up playing, tore her ACL, tore her meniscus, had all these ailments.
yeah.
And this all was happening as I was like a junior, senior. So like that prime time when you're like going to like get recruited to play baseball and stuff. And I was just like, is that really the type of life that I want, where like I'm going to be focusing on this? And I wasn't as dedicated to baseball as I was to like podcasting now, where like I'm like
Mm,
motivated to go do it every day. And like going to practice was a grind, like going to recruitment camps was a grind. I was just like,
really.
this isn't the type of life that I want to lead. And it was tough giving up something that I had been working on for like 13 years. I mean, I'd been playing baseball
Yeah.
since I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I do miss it sometimes, but it's just so interesting thinking about if I would have gone down that path compared to where I am now. I don't even know if that version of myself would recognize this version of myself. It's so fascinating. It's also interesting that we have that same bond with your sister. I have my sister. Your sister's older.
Hmm.
Yeah, my sister's 2 years older than me, and I'm, correct me if I'm wrong. This was from LinkedIn, so I don't know how outdated the research is. Your
Yeah.
sister studied social work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
me
Got
and
her
my sister,
master's.
what's up? She got a master's in social work. Yeah.
Hmm.
So me and my sister occasionally, when I talk about something, I'll bring it up to her. Like I'll talk about it on the show, and I'll bring it up to her because she's a psychologist, and I'll just get her opinion on it, and we'll go back and forth, just
Yeah.
talking like we're on a podcast. Honestly, do you ever do that with your sister? I mean, you're both in fields where you're helping people. and it's in their own unique, distinct ways. Do you ever just talk about, I don't know, like strategies, or you ever just reflect upon the experiences that you have with each other to help each other grow in that way?
Absolutely. I think one thing that's really, I don't know if it's underrated, if that's a good word to use, but stepping into the space of like your mind and like consciousness and psychology, any of the things that we talk about, most people don't talk about this kind of stuff.
No.
Like I'll bring some things up to my mom about like me having a conversation with someone about spirituality or consciousness or something random, and she has no idea what I'm talking about. And it reminds me that like I'm young for sure, but my knowledge in certain areas of like quantum physics or neuroscience or so many different things that I've learned about, most people can't resonate on. And so it's definitely a blessing that my sister went down the social work path because yeah, I mean, we can actually talk on things that she learned from spending thousands of dollars going to college and I learned from the books behind me. And
Yeah.
I always reinforce that I'm so grateful that I went down this path because it's like just two different paths and a lot of similarities, but oh yeah, my sister's like my best friend for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. My sister, yeah, she occasionally listens to the shows. I don't blame her because they're long as hell. But like
Yeah,
I'll
my sister
always make
too,
I always
yeah.
make a joke about her like every now and then. So I'm trying to think of a good joke to make about my sister now. Let's see. Let's tell you I haven't revealed. So my sister is also my best friend. But when we were
Mhm.
younger, she had a phase where she like hated me. And then like when I say like
Okay.
younger, I mean like I had like just come home from the hospital. And she apparently was not the biggest fan of me. So she tried to bite my pinky off, and my parents never let her forget it. They're always like, "Yeah, you hated your brother so much that you would legit like put your put his pinky in your mouth and try to bite it off." So anytime uh, she gets angry at me, I always bring that up. I should just be like, you started this. Um,
It
siblings are the
seems
best.
it seems to be a common thread. I remember one time we were in a subway line and like drive through and wouldn't stop talking. Like I was really young. I was just obnoxious as hell. Just ask my mom a question as she's ordering whatever. My sister kicks me and kicks a tooth out. Kicks a tooth out. And I don't even remember how old I was, but it's so funny that yeah, because they're everything, and then a child comes in and we take away all the
Yeah, you
excitement
take
of
away all the
oh this
attention.
is new.
Well,
Yeah,
so my sister didn't intentionally knock my tooth out, but we had like this karaoke machine.
yeah,
And this is such a weird story. So she was sitting on the couch here, and I was laying down underneath the couch here, and she dropped the microphone on my face.
yeah.
And this tooth here, the bottom half of it got knocked out. Think about that moment. Way too much. Anyway,
I love it. I
I
love
love
it.
it too, man. I love it too. I mean, we're 50 minutes in. This is flown by.
I feel like it's been like 5 minutes, but you're such a great interviewer and podcaster and conversationalist and
Thank you, dude.
I have to say I don't know, journalist, dude, the effort that you put
Thank you.
into like really find stuff. And I know that you do really you do your due diligence about it, but no one has ever brought anything up that you've brought up. And I just want to I see you so much for it and can't
Thank you.
appreciate it enough, man. You're doing
Again,
amazing. Again,
you said it earlier. Like I really appreciate the compliment, but I got to put it back on you.
you got to receive it.
It would be a disservice to you, and I say this to honestly anybody. It's a disservice to the people I bring on if I don't take the time to
That's how
ask
I
them new
feel.
things or get
Yeah.
to know them on a level. And again, I do my best what I can. Like I can't like call your mom and like ask her questions, but like anything that's out on the internet that like nobody's brought up before, like I want to be the guy who brings it up because I want to show other people why I brought you on the show. Like I didn't bring you on the show just because I needed a body to come on the show. Like I brought you on the show because you're a cool dude and there's a lot of value to be gained from listening to you speak. And I want to bring out the best in you and I want to bring out stories that you haven't shared so other people can fall in love with your story, can fall in love with your message the same way that I did. And then they can listen to this and they can go off on their own. They can, you know, do their own
Yeah,
thing.
brother, you're in your
Um,
zone of genius. I just have to. I have to. As much as you want to give it back to me, you need to receive it because it's, brother. I'll say like this is probably the best interview I'll ever do,
oh,
realistically.
wow.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. I seen Kyle McDowell's like response to you bringing up his mother, and he was blown away. Nick, same thing. Like the way that he spoke about you after he hopped off, bro. Like you don't realize it. You maybe you do realize it, but dude, like you're a fantastic interviewer. It's
Thank
unmatched,
you.
realistically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That really means a lot. It does.
Yeah.
Um, so before I'll end it, I'll
Mm,
ask you the show staple question,
mhm.
and we've touched on this topic a lot today. But after everything that you've gone through so far, what is the one thing you've learned about love? And that can be interpreted in any way. It can be a love for other people, a love for what you do, a love for the world as a whole, just something that you've learned about love.
Hmm. I'll bring up a quote that maybe isn't directly with that, but
Yeah,
I'll
go for it.
bring it back. I'll bring it back together. A quote that I have really been sitting in for the past couple of years is that all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. I grew up feeling terrible about myself when I was by myself, just having the worst self image, worth no self love, just like working out of a place of insufficiency and insecurity. And like you said, like baseball, like you wonder what that would have looked like. And you didn't have that much passion for it, so you didn't do that kind of stuff. I was the
Yeah.
first person. I was working out with the football players because we didn't have baseball workouts, and then I would be the first one at practice, and I'd be the last one to leave. Like I've always been this way. I'm just wired, and I think a lot of people are in that way, in some way. And I think for me, it's been the constant that all that matters is how I feel about myself when I'm by myself. I don't care if I'm achieving everything in the world. We've seen people like that. We've been surrounded in rooms where they'll have all the money in the world, but they're not happy with
Yeah.
themselves, or they're not. And I don't even like to use the word content, but in. They're not joyful. They don't have that joy. That's why I brought up Gay Hendricks earlier. Is like he's in his like almost 80, and he is one of the happiest humans, probably the happiest human I've ever seen, and I want to embody that now rather than embodying that later in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would say like just really your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship that you'll ever have. And a lot of people are focused on external things, external people, and just everything outside that we never give ourselves the time to really look at about how we feel about ourselves when we're by ourselves internally.
Yeah.
And those fears that pop up, the beliefs that we have about ourselves. That's why I always stay in a constant state of questioning, because I know that my idea of myself will never be real, because it's always going to be limiting. And if I live by that, then I'm doing a disservice not to myself but to the world as well. And
Yeah.
so I would say that is just really building my relationship with myself so that at the end of the day, I feel good about myself. And that's a damn constant process, brother.